Welcome in Brussels, Davrina, where you will speak tomorrow at the European Parliament about the persecution of Christians, specifically in Iran, the country where you are from. You are a Christian Assyrian from Iran.
Correct.
What does it mean to be an Assyrian in Iran and to be a Christian in Iran?
So thank you so much for having me. Assyrians and Armenians, these are Christian minorities, ethnic minorities in the country. And we are, my origin and my parents were Assyrian Christian pastors and believers. Being an Assyrian as a Christian does give me specific freedom to worship, since we are recognized Christians in the country. Iran is a home to a variety of religious and ethnic minorities. And Assyrian or Armenians are part of those minorities in Iran. Assyrian Christians are recognized religious minorities within the country, next to the Zoroastrian faith and Judaism. So Christianity is partially recognized as a religion in the Iran. However, even those recognized minorities and religious community face specific limits to the practice of their faith, to the assembly and to worship within the country. So being an Assyrian, you are either Orthodox, Catholic, or Protestant, partially evangelical. I was born into a Protestant family. My parents were pastors and church pioneers, which meant in terms I did experience discriminations and mistreatments against my faith, even as a child and growing up in the country.
Yeah, you said since you were a child, you were victim of some sort of discrimination. Could you tell me concrete examples of a discrimination and maybe intolerance as well?
So within the country, even though we are recognized Christian, yet when you do not comply, the main religion of Iran is Shia. And since the 1979 revolution, the regime has imposed a new identity upon the Iranian people. And this identity is based on a religious belief, a system, which is the Shia belief. So if you do not comply to the Shia belief, you will face discriminations. Part of that would be restrictions to the practice of your faith, restrictions to your freedom of how to clothe yourself, to the freedom of... I experienced specifically as a child discrimination at school. Being a Christian, we were najis, unclean. We were mistreated at schools because we did not belong to that normal holy community. It was worse for me as an evangelical Christian. I remember in the 90s, more than 8 pastors and church leaders were killed because of their faith. Part of that were Pastor Heiko Vespian, Pastor Sudman, Pastor Mikhailian, Pastor Dibaj, and many more. My father would be arrested or interrogated on a regular basis. He was forced to answer to the government, to the regime, to the authorities. He was forced to cooperate to some level with the authorities. And if he did not comply, he would face discriminations, and he was threatened. My life growing up, it was very normal for me to be monitored.
What do you mean monitored?
So the Minister of Intelligence officers or the police would follow our car. Wherever we went, they would follow us. They would take pictures of us.
Oh yeah.
They would take a picture of me and then send it to my father, send it to my mother, just to let them know that we are watching it. They broke into our homes, again, just to make sure that we know they are watching us, that we are under their surveillance. They would call us on a regular basis, ask, where are you? If it was like, whatever, answer them, they would answer back, we know where you are. So we knew very well that we are watched. Our church was watched, our home was watched.
Yeah.
Wherever we went, we were watched, we were followed.
And the constant surveillance.
There was a constant surveillance on us. So all our actions and ministries and our activities were extremely controlled by the government.
And did you manage to get used to that sort of life? You, your parents?
Absolutely. In so many ways, it became so normal that when I left the country, I was shocked of how not normal this was.
Yes. Yeah.
It had become, I got so used to it. I got used to being followed by the police. Every time I would watch into my mirror, my front mirror in the car, I would see the car. It took me 8 years not to look back and not to check who's following me now. It took me 8 years living in Europe not to park my car and make sure all the other cars that are passing by and then drive again. It did become normal because that's what Christianity was.
Yeah.
That's what it meant to be a believer in the country. You will be threatened, discriminated against, you will be oppressed, mistreated, to the extreme points when in 2009, when the authorities closed down our churches, I was called on a weekly basis. I was interrogated on a weekly basis. I was forced to cooperate with the government to the point that they threatened me of being raped, of being in prison, and eventually executed.
Yeah. What sort of restrictions were there to the worship activities of your community?
So we need to understand that Iran has signed the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, and it has signed the Covenant of International Law, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So according to these signatures, according to the international law, Iran is complied. They have to provide freedom to all their citizens. Freedom of religion or belief. Also, freedom of sharing one belief. Freedom to convert from one religion to another.
Of course.
However, even though this was our freedom, this was our right to practice, yet we were not allowed to share our faith with Iranians. To some degrees, we were allowed to allow Farsi-speaking Iranians or any other religious minorities to come to the church, question us, and we were allowed to answer them. But sharing our faith was illegal. This was...
What about the use of the language during the religious services and in your evangelization programs with outsiders, I would say?
So there are two different times. There was a time that we were allowed to speak Farsi in the church, and we were allowed to have our sermons, our preachings, our Sunday services, our worship in Farsi language, literature in Farsi language. There was certain freedom to practice our faith, especially during the Khatami's presidential period. Afterwards, when Ahmadinejad came the president, the table changed, and the whole we were not allowed anymore to conduct services in Farsi language. We were not allowed to have literature, books in the Farsi language. We were only told that only Assyrian language and only Assyrian people are allowed to enter the church, and the converts, meaning Christians from other religions, were not able, they are not recognized Christians. They don't exist as Christians, even though converts are the largest Christian community in the country. However, during the Ahmadinejad, and especially after his second elections, we were not allowed anymore to receive Iranians, converts in the church. We were not allowed to preach in Farsi, to worship in Farsi, up to the point that evangelical Christians in Iran were considered terrorists, Zionists, and a threat to national security. So evangelical Christians are in Iran today persecuted, as well as whether they're Syrian Armenians, as well as the converts who have absolutely no right to the practice of their freedom.
Were you arrested during your life in Iran?
I was, yes. After the church was closed, I was a student in university.
In 2009, huh?
And during that time, I was arrested. Multiple times, I was called for interrogations.
What did they want to get from you?
So our church was the first church that they closed down in 2009. And they wanted me to cooperate with the government.
Cooperate means exactly what?
Provide them with names of our members, times of our gatherings, numbers of how many members gather where, places that they would gather, names of the leaders and pastors' activities in different cities. So they wanted me to work as their spy and provide them with information against my own family, but against also other pastors and other churches.
Yes.
And when I did not comply to their requests, the threats got worse and worse. They expelled me from university, and they threatened me to be imprisoned and to be sentenced 5 years to prison.
What were you studying at the university?
Psychology is a term part of counseling and psychology for schools.
And when did you leave Iran?
I left Iran in 2010.
2010.
Yes.
But I think you told me that you had studied abroad before leaving, let's say, definitely Iran, at least as long as the regime is still in place.
Yes. Yes, when I was 17, I went to England to study theology.
Theology?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I studied theology for 3.5 years in England. And then I went back home in 2007 and then started to study psychology. And I was ministering in the church alongside my family until 2010 when I had to leave the country. And
you chose to go to Switzerland, or was it any country in Western Europe?
It was any country. It was get to Europe.
Yes.
Our idea, we thought everything will become normal again. We thought that it's just a phase, and I will be back. I will be able to go back home sometime soon. So I left the country thinking this is gonna be over very soon, maximum half a year, 1 year, and then I can go back home, and this is gonna be okay. That was our hope. That was our dream, my dream, and still 12 years later, I'm still in Europe.
Yeah, and was it difficult at that time to get political asylum on the religious grounds in Switzerland?
It was. It took me 2 years, and I had to provide a lot of proofs that me and my family were persecuted. At the time, was very difficult. Yes, to prove that we were truly Christians, even though we are Assyrians and ethnic Christians, but still to prove that we are believers and we've been persecuted in the country.
You said your family was persecuted. Can you give me more details about what happened to them?
Sure. So they faced discriminations also all their lives since, let's say, at least since the revolution from 1979. But my father was arrested in 2014.
Yes.
My brother was arrested in 2016. In the same year, my mother was arrested. But my parents were given together 15 years.
15 years in prison?
15 years in prison based on propaganda accusations, acting against national security, and educating, teaching spies against the nation, against the Iranian authorities.
Yeah. And they served their prison terms?
No, they did not. In 2020, they were summoned to endure their full sentences. That's where the time that they were forced to flee the country. We were able to get them out of the country.
So now your role in Switzerland, or are they in another country?
They're in Switzerland.
They are in Switzerland. But your brother is still living in Iran?
Correct. He and his family remained back in Iran.
And he's also under threat of being sent to prison?
Yes and no. He endured his sentence. He was 3 months in prison once, and then he went back for another 6 months. So he has done his time. He was released due to Corona in also 2020. So he is out of the country. He is out of the prison. I'll say that again. He is out of the prison, and we hope that his case is closed and he is free, and we hope that he doesn't have to go back to prison, and or he will not face more challenges. Yeah.
What are now your activities and as an advocate of religious freedom in Iran, now that you live in the West, let's say? What are your objectives?
Yes. I do use every platform that I get to raise my voice against injustice, against discrimination, oppression that is happening in my country, either for any religious freedom in my country. Yeah. So whether I have a platform in the UN or in America or here now in Brussels, any activities, any platform I get, whether it's a church or our political platforms, I do use them, and I want to raise my voice and be the voice for those who cannot speak.
And I'm sure that your voice will be heard and listened to tomorrow at the European Parliament.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time that you have devoted to our interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.